These saying, wondering if you have read the Apocalypse of Peter. A quick Google search pulls it up. It is a more horrific description of hell than the Quran. And I'm wondering if this may be the origin of verse 31 of the practice of throwing certain people off buildings. I think these, by certain people, I think she's referring to LGBT people, right? I don't know, when you say the origin of verse 31 of which surah, which chapter? There's a lot of verse 31s in the Quran, which I think you can't just refer to the verse number. You also have to refer to the chapter, because I don't know which one you're referring to. The whole throwing people off of roof buildings, was that in the Quran? I thought that was in the Hadith. Suha, help me out here. Somebody, am I misremembering this? I don't think there was anything in the Quran referring to throwing people off of buildings. I think that was a Hadith. That was not a Quranic verse. Anyways, to refer. Okay, so the Apocalypse of Peter is one of those books that didn't make it into the Bible. One of those many. What is it? What did he call it? Apocrypha. I can't pronounce that. Apocrypha. Yeah, I think I said it right. That there are a lot of Christian texts that were going around, and this one is like, I think, at least 100 years after Jesus or something. Yeah, I think this was like this is one of the later texts that didn't make it into the Bible, and it has a very descriptive version of hell in it, and I think the punishment for. Oh, by the way, guys, the Apocalypse of Peter is very. Oh, you're saying verse 31 of Apocalypse of Peter. Okay. Yeah, and also Music Guy is saying I think it's in the Hadith. Yeah, it's not in the Quran. I thought when you said verse, you were referring to the Quran. Okay. So yes, the punishment in hell for LGBT, according to Apocalypse of Peter, is for them to repeatedly be thrown off of YouTube. I'm not saying this. YouTube gods, guys, everybody pray to the YouTube gods to not strike us down. This is not anything we're saying. This is just what we're just describing what's in Christian text, okay? Christian text. By the way, this Apocalypse of Peter has a very disgusting hell, and surprisingly, it was kind of popular. Like, people were taking this very seriously, and it was, at the end, they decided to not include this in the Bible, but it was kind of popular, right? So, for example, I was going to say, this is a interesting text to refer to right now, because the Apocalypse of Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, has specific punishment in hell for women who commit abortion, right? It's very Dante Inferno like, right? Because in Dante's Inferno, you can see people's punishment in hell is relevant to their sin, right? So your main sin that you're in hell for, the punishment that you get for it is going to somehow resemble the sin that you committed, right? That's Dante's Inferno. And Apocalypse of Peter was also similarly, like, everyone's like, if you're an adulterer, this is what's going to happen to you. If you're LGBT, apparently they're going to take you off of high places and repeatedly throw you, and then they're going to bring you back up and they're going to throw you, which is very much like the Islamic hadith that Dee is referring to. So this is why she expects maybe that they're copying from each other, which I will respond to. But also the punishment for abortion in Apocalypse of Peter is the women responsible for this are going to be inside blood and feces up to their necks. So in blood and shit, okay? And they're going to be stuck like that in blood and shit. And they're going to have the fetuses that they aborted, they're going to come and they're going to shoot fire at their heads into their eyes. Okay? the babies, their entire body of the baby will shoot fire out. They're gonna be like, and you're like you're in blood and feces, and you're like this, and you're gonna see the fetuses flying around and they're gonna shoot fire into your eyes. Okay, this is Christian take. This is in the Apocalypse of Peter, and this was considered like this. This could have been in the Bible if it was canonized. If it became Orthodox, it could have become canonized, and it could have been flying fetuses shooting fire from their body into your eyes because you aborted them while you're dug neck deep into, into shit and blood. Yes. Wait. What? Okay. So what's the question though? So yes. Okay. So I don't think that unless you've seen a scholar say that the hadith in Islam when it comes to throwing people off of buildings comes from this text, I don't think the similarities is enough for us to come up with conclusions like this, right? You have to understand that Islamic text, if you add the hadith, is a lot of text, and Christian text, if you add it all, is a lot of, like, you are going to find similarities even by random sometimes. I'm not saying they're not copies of each other. There are Christian texts, for example, that we think, okay, so for example, there are Gospels, I think Gospel of Thomas, that refers to Jesus's infancy, and this part of this Gospel never made it. Was it the Gospel of Thomas that refers to Jesus's infancy? That this never made it into the Bible, right? This is another apocrypha that never got canonized as part of the Bible. And it includes Jesus as a child, as a kid, performing miracles, performing some very horrific miracles, including killing other children who offended him, by the way, if you didn't know. But one of those miracles include raising clay birds that he made to life. So he would make like birds out of clay, and he would make them fly and would like become real, like Pinocchio or something, right? And this miracle, even though it didn't make it into the Bible, this miracle made it into the Quran, if I remember correctly. The Quran has the miracle of Jesus making birds fly, from clay birds fly. Am I right, music guy, about this? I think this is in the Quran, yes. And I think it's assumed that these stories of Jesus committing these miracles have the same origins. I don't know if it was copied from this specific gospel, or if they have the same origin, but they are related, okay? But the reason why we know they're related is not just because they're similar, is because we are told that they're similar, that they are related by scholars, right? Like, I don't think we are in a position to decide whether these are copies from each other or not, okay? Because the people who analyze texts like this and decide whether or not, when you actually read the analysis behind the biblical scholars or scholars of texts from late antiquity and stuff like that, when you actually read their work, you get so impressed with how much thought and work and background knowledge and expertise that goes into deciding what comes from where, and the evidence that they have to find for these things, right? Like, the level of expertise that you need to come up with answers like this is so much. Like, you could be even if you're a historian that analyzes evidence like this, if you are expert at text from a different era or a different location, you wouldn't even see yourself fit to be able to have an answer to this. Like, even if you're a historian, even if your job is to come up with answers for this, but for a different location or a different era, then you're not the authority for us to like ask. And even if you are, you might have contradict a different other scholar that might disagree with you, and then you see the fight that they're having with each other, and the level of the level of nuance and details and the evidence they use, your mind is blown sometimes about how much information and background knowledge these people have to be able to decide stuff like this. It's very interesting. But I think, like, for us to be able, so I think, like, we don't know, right? And for us to be able to even suggest that it might be so, we have to have somebody with expertise in the field to have suggested it so. Yeah, and not just in, with the background and with the on that specific era and that specific kind of text. You know what I mean? Unless without that reference, anything is possible. Yeah, like we already mentioned, there are some examples of, but I don't think we should give it any weight unless the people with better credentials have suggested it so. Right? Does that make sense, D? Does that make sense? Oh, Musa guy saying yes, it's in the Quran. Yeah, so the miracle of Jesus bringing birds to life is in the Quran, and it's also in Christian texts that didn't make it into the Bible, which predates the Quran, which makes it, anyways. But anyways, that's something else that I wouldn't just say it because I think so. I would say it because other people with much more better credentials than me have said so. And I'm not saying that you should just believe it 100% because they said so, because sometimes they contradict each other. But I give it a lot more weight rather than just seeing similarities. Because, guys, if you see similarities and just come up with conclusions just because you're seeing similarities, that's what conspiracy theories do. You know what I mean? Like, you could get into, like, if you notice patterns there and be like, try to come up with your own conclusions, but without the background knowledge and the details on that specific field. If you're not careful, you're gonna get in. That's exactly how people who come up with like the Q people and the 9/11 truthers and the vaccine deniers. That's exactly how their minds operate. I'm not saying, D, by the way, that you're doing that, but I'm just saying be careful just because you see patterns, not to come up with conclusions. And I'm not saying that this is not related. I'm just saying that we're not in a place to decide that, right? Yeah, D is saying same punishment for same people. It's just I'm just. It's just. Yeah, it is very curious. It is very interesting. It's it seems like very coincidental. Exactly the same people, exactly the same punishment. It is interesting, but I'm just saying, other than the fact that it's curious that this has happened, there is no way that we could take it farther than that. Like for us, we just have to be like, well, that's odd, but that's where we should stop. Okay, unless we are participating in the field or have more information, we should not be tempted to come up with any more conclusions unless somebody actually does the hard work for us and goes and digs for information. But yeah, it is very interesting. So if there ever is a connection is found, then let us know. But until somebody actually does find evidence, we shouldn't come up with conclusions.
Hey guys, if you want to join these streams live, get your comments and questions read by Ali and Armin and the guests, and most importantly, to get full access to the full video versions of all these episodes, become a patron. Link in the description below.